Hi folks, it's the HogTieChamp with a very serious video, one that I have to admit I found a little difficult to make. Most of you know what's happened so far. Oolong9 had made a video where she described some bizarre kinky requests that she'd received from Wallyo 777. She was mostly concerned that this same kinky message was targeted to some very young YouTube users. DPR Jones and a few others have mirrored the video, and every place this video appears, we see two very different sets of comments. And of course, like any comment war worth its salt, the two sides can't understand the other side's position. On the right-hand side, we have people who aren't really concerned about this. On the left-hand side, we have people who can't understand why the right-hand side can't see a problem with it. This video is intended to explain why the people who are concerned are quite correct to be concerned. I encourage kids to watch this video. In fact, grab your parents, make them watch too. If you're a parent, grab your kids. But be warned. There's only one way to talk about this. We're discussing some frank, grown-up behavior, and the only way to talk about it is in a frank, grown-up manner. We'll be discussing some unusual sexual behavior, some fetishes and philia, and even showing some scenes from movies that you might find unpalatable. I'd suggest that kids over 12 are equipped to understand this material, especially if they have a parent available to help explain the context. I'll also note that all the video clips you're looking at are readily available to any 12-year-old on the internet. There are some terms that I'm going to use carefully. For example, I will distinguish between a pedophile and a child molester. Also, we'll speak about the fetishists in a completely separate class. I will not be using terms like pervert, which is a moral distinction, or criminal, which is something best left up to lawyers who represent the people. Also, I won't be drawing the distinction between a pedophile and a hebephile because that distinction isn't relevant in this context. For this video, a pedophile is any person who, post-puberty, has a preferential sexual interest in somebody in puberty or before puberty. A child molester, on the other hand, is someone who has acted on a sexual interest in a pubescent or prepubescent person, whether or not it's actually their first choice as a partner. Using this definition, having a pedophilic interest is just another example of kink, or paraphilia. In my belief, this is the heart of the disagreement. You see, if a YouTube user had started approaching 12-year-olds for routine sexual behavior, people would have jumped on that. They would have absolutely objected. Conversations about moral distinctions tend to get a little confused when we start discussing paraphilias. It's hard to understand other people's behaviors.
Oh, look how nasty and dirty your little tongue is.
You might be surprised to learn that these paraphilias usually come in sets. For example, some furries also like to wear diapers. There are far too many paraphilias and combinations of paraphilias to catalog them all. In this regard, I wholly believe internet rule number 34. If something exists, then somebody makes porn about it. Suppose you get horny by watching morons open food products. Well, there's plenty of videos out there about that. So whatever paraphilic or kinky interest a person has, generally it's something they explore on their own, or explore with a willing adult partner, so it's something that we see as benign and we can chuckle and laugh off. Having said that, the specific paraphilia that Wallyo 777 and a few others are showing is something we should be concerned about. Let's take a look at how paraphilias progress. The sources for this summary are in the description. At stage 1, awareness of the unusual interest develops. Over time, this leads to fantasy, which may or may not include contact with other adults with similar interests. For many people with an unusual paraphilic interest, they may stop at stage 2 and only fantasize. For others, they'll break through that barrier and move on to engagement, where they're seeking partners, and eventually on to participation. You probably notice that when it comes to pedophilia, the label for stage 4 changes from participation to molestation. The presumption here is that the partner is not a participant, but rather a victim. Let's take a look at it this way. As a person becomes aware of their pedophilic interest, it generally progresses to fantasy, and they may stall at that point because of the obvious moral barrier. Most people know better than to engage actual children in their fantasies. In fact, this has become part of the typology model that distinguishes pedophiles from actual child molesters. While many pedophiles stall at stage 2 and seek help or therapy or commit suicide, those that have a severe sociopathy will ignore that moral barrier and go on to communicate with children and eventually go on to molestation. Some with very severe sociopathy will go past the next moral barrier and engage in violence. The point here is that once a pedophile has begun engaging and seeking children as partners, they generally move on to molestation. Next, let's look at the reasons why somebody with a routine paraphilia might start to seek younger and younger participants. It's important to note that most people who have a paraphilia are not pedophiles, and yet when you look at pedophiles, they usually have some other paraphilic interest. Now, why would that be? A relatively new theory focuses on the engagement stage of general paraphilia. Think about it. Suppose you had an unusual sexual interest, something that other adults wouldn't normally find appealing. Where would you look for potential partners? The grocery store? Your church group? Instead, you might try some sort of deception or emotional control over a person who is susceptible to that kind of thing. So where does this leave us? Personally, I'm willing to give the kinky people the benefit of the doubt here. Having a paraphilic interest does not cause pedophilia. However, not all kinky people have moral barriers, and unfortunately for us on YouTube, I believe we have some people here who satisfy their kinky urges by contacting children. Now, in defense of some of those people who've said that this isn't really a problem, I suspect it's because they didn't go see the videos and see how young those children are. They also didn't go and take a look at the types of comments that are being left on these children's videos. It's really quite offensive. I will include a few of them later in the video. You'll want to brace yourself for that. Some users have suggested that this behavior is completely harmless. In fact, we should feel a little sorry for Wallyo 777 and others. After all, where are they going to find their foot porn? Well, I'm not even a foot porn fan myself, but I found several clips of a wide variety in a matter of minutes. And look where I found them. I imagine the selection's even better outside of YouTube. There's specialty sites for every fetish. Just remember internet rule number 34. There are even sites where you can find compatible partners in your city. So why do these folks need to contact children to create new material? The reason is it's not about the feet. It's all about the rush from the power of controlling children. So is this just a simple foot fetish? Nothing to be worried about? Of course it's not. There's hours worth of footsie video on YouTube. There's months worth on the adult sites. They could go to sites to even hook up with people in person. The only difficulty they have is that those people are all adults. Those sites are all designed for adults. For these guys, the kink is not the foot fetish. The kink is all about controlling kids, conning, deceiving for that feeling of power. As I said before, based on all data available, contacting children is the barrier that distinguishes a pedophile from a child molester. Here's a comment a user had put up on a video that was produced by two 12-year-old girls. Looking at the video this is attached to, it's quite obvious that the girls are at most 12 years old. There are dozens of comments and PMs that go to kids that deceive them using the children's game of truth or dare. This user asks a 12-year-old girl to make a video where she scrunches and spreads her toes, which I suppose if you're into that sort of thing is kind of cool. Here is some scrunching and spreading being done by an adult woman. You know, if you're into that sort of thing. But rather than watch an adult woman do that, they will play games with children, pretending to be their friends. Oh, and remember this guy? Apparently it's quite pleasant to lick the sole of an adult woman's foot. This guy, however, has written this comment in response to a video that was produced by a 12-year-old and an 11-year-old. It is utterly absurd to think that these guys are contacting these children out of a plain vanilla foot fetish. Their fetishistic foreplay is to contact children and to control them for sexual pleasure, even if the control is in a fashion that seems a little silly to the rest of us. And as I said before, anybody who has such a rehearsed and refined pattern for seeking, vetting, and coaxing children is not stuck at the fantasy stage or at the engagement stage. But YouTube will fix it, right? Surely they'll investigate and track IP addresses and warn children and parents, contact authorities, get people arrested, right? No. Think about a beach owned by a large city. Who is more likely to sue that city? The family whose kid drowned when there was a lifeguard sitting right there, or the family whose kid drowned when there wasn't a lifeguard? Let's face facts, people. When it comes to YouTube, there is no one at the helm. We have to decide how we're going to handle situations like Wallyo 777. At this stage, I can only offer general advice. We need to ask ourselves if this is what we want our YouTube community to be like. Kids and parents need to be aware. My main point is this. As fun as YouTube is, there is a problem with pedophiles here. And I would suggest that when a user raises a concern about there being a pedophile in our midst, we should probably take that user's concern seriously. Finally, I have a message for the young YouTubers. That's some crazy shit, eh? But trust me on this, most people are pretty good. YouTube is weird, fun, wacky, and zany. In fact, you'll find everywhere there are human beings, it's weird, fun, wacky, and zany. Enjoy it, have fun, contribute, don't live in fear. There are few creeps in the world, just learn the warning signs. Here's a really good one. If a grown-up asks you for a favor, especially something to do with your body, ask yourself, why?